Welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam. After a few delays, we have finally seen Death on the Nile. Delays both on my part and on the part of the movie because of COVID. My delays because I went to the movie theater on Wednesday to watch it, sat in the theater, got comfortable, and then found out that they got a corrupted file, so guess who didn't see the movie? So I sit there and, that didn't, that was a shitty, thing. Then today I go and see the movie, and there are some problems to be had with this movie. I want to talk about pacing. I think pacing is the approach I want to take with this, because pacing is an important part of movies. Now, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to preface this with saying I have not read any Agatha Christie. I watched Murder on the Orient Express, the most recent version, also directed by Kenneth Branagh, with Kenneth Branagh playing Hercule Poirot, who, no matter who pronounces his name in this movie, does so with an incredibly over-the-top French accent, which is great, cool, I guess. But, I saw that first one, and, that's really all of my exposure to this. I mean, I know the character has existed for a long time. I'm aware of Agatha Christie as an author, but I never read any of her books to be able to say this is a good or a bad adaptation. I can simply look at the movie that we got and say, does this work or does this not? Because when we're talking about a movie that's being adapted from a book, the book should not be required reading to enjoy the movie. Like, you don't have to walk into a Spider-Man movie. Like, if you walk into a Spider-Man movie, you don't have to have read Spider-Man comics to understand it. The movie stands on its own. Similarly, Harry Potter, the movies, operate as if, people who hadn't read the books saw the movies and were still found them enjoyable. Presumably the same thing for Twilight, the same thing for The Hunger Games, the same thing for any number of other projects like this, where, that's not you shouldn't be obligated to read something to thoroughly understand what you're watching. If I can't understand what is going on while you are in your, movie, that speaks to a fundamental, problem with your storytelling. I think this movie has a few pacing issues that bog down the movie quite a bit. When we talk about pacing issues, what I mean is getting to the inciting incident of the movie and then what happens after that point. Because here's the thing. Number one, I don't need to see a secret door, and again, spoilers, because I'm assuming I'm not the only one who hasn't read Death on the Nile before seeing this. I don't need to see a secret origin for why Hercule Poirot, or however the fuck they pronounce it in this fucking movie every time. I don't need a secret origin for his mustache. I really don't. I don't need to see how he got his mustache. I don't need to see where his mustache came from. I don't need to see any of that. It's all not important information by any stretch of the imagination. Like, there is no point to that, and it doesn't come into the plot in any major way. Neither does the wife, and that right there saves you a solid 10 minutes of screen time. Now, on top of that, take into consideration the fact that the movie takes place over, it's 2 hours and 7 minutes, so 2 hours and 2 including credits. I mean, you could have cut that and used that to space out a little bit the interrogations and not make it feel like the way the movie feels is that there's a party going on and these murders get in the way of a perfectly good party movie, but that's not why we're here. We're here for a whodunit. We're here to see Hercule Poirot solve a crime. That's what I'm here to see. I'm not here to see the party and everyone giving each other weird looks and all of that. I'm not here to see any of that. And the thing is, too, I think that Branagh and I guess Michael Green, who wrote the screenplay, it's a little of both because it comes from set direction and all of that. They don't do enough to really layer in some of the important pieces of information that Poirot knows by the end. And that's a problem. Like, when we talk about a good twist versus a bad twist, what defines a good twist in comparison to a bad twist is that a good twist will be layered into the movie so that way the viewer can figure it out along the way. The same thing in a whodunit. I should be able to go through the movie and still understand what's going on and be able to pick out, oh, here's where the evidence is leading. Instead of the movie hand-holding you to the different people and being like, was it this one, was it this one, was it this one, was it this one? And that doesn't help me. By the time we get to the murder, we should have that point. And when we get to the third act and he's explaining how the murder happened, I feel a little confused because I feel like I would recall an unmuffled gunshot going off in the middle of the scene of everyone trying to get help for Armie Hammer's character. I feel like that would have been something I would have noticed and remembered. That's a key piece of information that this movie just doesn't do. Like, that feels like an important piece of information that is not being told to the audience. Like, for whatever reason, they didn't feel that that's necessary for understanding of the movie, but I feel like that's a pretty big thing to have sound edited out. And I feel, not even sound edited out, but like edited back in later. And I think that like there's a lot of things like that where it's like, we don't quite get an explanation as to, like, it's not that we don't get explanations, it's we get explanations, but they don't 100% line up with what we've seen up until that point. Like, if there's an explanation for something in a movie, in a movie like this, you should be tying up the loose ends. Your goal as the filmmaker in a whodunit is to lay out story threads and then tie them together where they need to happen. At no point does any of that happen. And it's not saying, oh, it's a twist, you're not supposed to see it coming. Well, you should at least have some indication, like on a rewatch, that something's happening. Now, I haven't watched the movie again, but there are certain things that you're like, no, wait, that definitely didn't happen. The other thing is the first part of the movie, really kind of like, and I'm going to call this the Perry Mason issue, because if you watch Perry Mason, you'll notice there's a similar issue they get to run into on that show, where it's like, all of the evidence is circumstantial. Like, yeah, there's one or two pieces of physical evidence, but it's like, it's all circumstantial. And not enough to bind anyone to, the murder. Like, just don't confess anything, and, like, that's the big problem. Like, if you watch, Perry Mason, not the new one with Robert Downey Jr. producing, I'm talking the original from the 50s, with, I forgot the name of the actor, but if you watch those, every single one of them ends with a confession, and every single one of them spends, like, an hour getting to the murder. Like, I don't want to see the hour leading up to the murder. Like, and then, at least on Perry Mason, we know who committed the murder, so when we see him investigating, we see where it's going. Like, treat this more like a police procedural, where I can watch it and I can kind of figure it out as I go along. And that's the thing, it's like, Dick Wolf could have written a better movie than this, because that I think is fundamentally the problem here, is that not enough is layered into it to make the third act well executed. And then on top of that, because we kind of meander through the first two acts with a bunch of innocuous bullshit that really doesn't amount to anything, like, at the end of the day, the lawyer pushing the rock down, trying to kill, trying to kill those two, Gal Gadot and Armie Hammer, like, him pushing the rock down does not have any impact on the plot. Like, because the person who they suspect of doing it is immediately ruled out as a suspect for the murder of I forgot the character, Lizette, I think her name was, who was played by Gal Gadot. And it's like, well, and then it's this big conspiracy where it's like her and Armie Hammer working together to kill her, but it's like, at the same time, it's like, that misdirect ultimately amounts to nothing. Because the idea that, oh, well, she couldn't have done it because, she was there, it's like, that rock falling doesn't do anything. Like, arguably, that whole, like, little meander through to the, to the tomb does absolutely nothing. It doesn't develop the plot. It doesn't, there's other ways to do that. And I don't think we necessarily need this movie to progress at the pace it does. And then by the time we get to the first murder, which is the murder of Lizette, the movie doesn't do a good job of being like, oh, hey, we have to get, like, by the time we get to that point, it's like an hour in, or like an hour 20 in. So it's like, oh, so now we got to wrap up solving the murder in 40 minutes. And it's like, well, I'm here to solve the murder. That's what I'm here for. Like, I'm not here to watch them, lead up to the murder. I'm here to watch them solve the murder. And you didn't do a good job of getting me to that point in a way that kept me interested. Where I'm sitting there and I'm like, can we just get to the fucking... Can someone die already? Like, if I'm sitting there asking this question, you're failing at your job. Because that means that if you're not killing someone in that time, you're not making the backstory surrounding it interesting enough where I'm like, okay, I'm okay with watching this nonsense instead of watching a murder get solved. Like I'm here to watch a murder get solved. That's what I'm here for. Like, I'm not here to watch the family drama. And if you're gonna give me family drama, at least make it interesting. And that's like, it's kind of like watching a Godzilla movie and you're kind of stuck watching the human shit, and you're like, why am I watching the human shit? I'll take the 40-minute cut in the movie where I can just watch the Godzilla fight King Kong. That's all I want to see. That's what I'm here for. I don't need to see all this other nonsense. But at least in that movie, it's interspersed a little better and laced into the plot a little bit better. So it's like every once in a while you get something happening instead of it being backloaded and everything at the same time. And by the way, I'm fairly certain this movie tries to convince us that Gal Gadot and Letitia Wright are the same age, and I don't buy that. I don't know. I feel like that's a weird thing to have layered into the movie. Like, oh, by the way, these two characters who are vastly different ages in real life, and like, on top of that, Letitia Wright is, at this point, known for playing the teenage sister of Black Panther. She looks younger than she is. Gal Gadot doesn't look older. Gal Gadot looks younger than she is, too, but they don't look the same age anywhere near the same age. And it's kind of not, I don't want to say distracting, but it is certainly a little bit of a weird decision to have that happen. Like at first I was like, is she saying that, like, Gal Gadot and Letitia Wright's mom went to, or aunt went to, whatever that relationship was? And the thing is, that's another problem, is that I'm referring to everyone by their actor name, because it's a big ensemble cast with a bunch of actors, but I don't remember anyone's names. And that's partially because the movie has a lot of problem with, everyone speaking in accents. And it's like, there are certain people you get accustomed to their accent. Like, at this point, I'm accustomed to interpreting Russell Brand into English. And I'm accustomed to hearing Gal Gadot's accent, because Gal Gadot has her accent that she just speaks with regularly. And that's what she sounds like. Like, I'm used to that. I don't think that, when we get to... Why the fuck is it a four-way stop right now? There we go. I don't think that when we get to, fuck, what was it? Like, when we, like, everyone else doing fake accents is necessary. I don't think that, Kenneth Branagh doing a French accent on top of everything else is a little bit like, we have Letitia Wright doing, like, a New Orleans accent. You got, like, Annette Bening doing an accent, and it's like everyone's speaking in an accent, so you have to tune yourself in that way. Honestly, this movie would work a lot better with subtitles, because then you'd know everyone's name at least. Like, the fact that I leave this movie not knowing anyone's name besides Lynette, and she ended up dead, and I think Letitia Wright was Rosalie, or Rosalind, or something like that. I think it was Rosalie. And of course, Hercule Poirot, him. And I know his friend who ends up dead, his name is Book. So, because I'm like, oh, okay, so that's easy to remember. Book, like books and book. But no one else's, I don't remember anyone else's name. Jackie, I think, was one of the killers, whose name whose actress I don't know. But yeah, I like, look, there's, this movie is, it's like one of those things where it's like, remember how, like, Neighbors, or, like, Grown Ups 2 was criticized for, like, oh, Adam Sandler just want to take all of his friends on a vacation? This kind of feels like that, where it's like, we're just going to bring everyone on a vacation to Egypt to shoot this, and call it a day. I'm not saying the movie's terrible. I'm saying there's a lot of questionable choices in terms of, like, pacing and all of that. Also, this sound mixing is a little off, because that's another problem that, like, kind of layers into not understanding the dialogue, where the score overpowers the score overpowers the voices a lot of times during key moments when they're explaining key backstory. And for a movie like this that's dialogue-driven, that's a problem. And this is also why Best Sound and Best Sound Mixing should be 2 categories of the Academy Awards. But, like, I feel like that's a pretty big fuck-up on a technical level. Also, there's a drone shot at one point in the movie that jitters a little bit. It's an establishing shot with a drone. Maybe it's just that I was watching it on an IMAX screen and it wasn't meant for that, but that would seem weird to me if that was the case. But a camera jitter is a pretty big thing to have, where it's like, oh, that's noticeable. Where it's like, it's almost as if it was being live streamed in and the internet jumped at that moment. There's a lot of things in this movie that just kind of feel weird, and not feel, and not in a bad way necessarily, in a, I don't know, maybe there is someone who is like the anti-me who sees this movie and is like, I'll watch all the stuff for the first hour and 10 minutes before we get to the murder and enjoy it. But, I think I ran into it a little bit with Murder on the Orient Express, too, where I was like, come on, it's called Murder on the Orient Express. Get to the fucking train. Same thing with Death on the Nile. I was like, get to the boat. I'm here to see the boat. I want to see a closed crime scene murder be solved by this guy. And that's the thing, too. It's like, we sit here, it's like, with a character like Hercule Poirot, we don't need to see, we don't need an explanation as to how he got to where he is. And I'm kind of okay with the fact that they don't sit here and explain how he figures everything out. But, a little something for the audience would be fantastic. I'm not asking for, you to handhold me through the plot or, something like that. But, at least give me something where I can understand where Poirot is getting his information from. Because it's at a lot of times, it seems like he's just pulling it out of his ass. And he's just like, oh, hey, so I know this. It's like, well, where did you figure that out? And then it's at one point where it's he got the book and they're switching the books. It's they show him switching the books on purpose. It's I know he switched the books on purpose. That you explained to me. I don't need to see, apparently, at one point before the movie kind of starts, Book's mother, who's played by Annette Bening, hires Poirot to investigate Rosalie, to find out if she's on the up and up and all of that, because her son wants to marry her. And, on the boat, Poirot has a book that looks similar to her ledger, so he switches the books, and she comes over and is like, hey, you took my book? And it's oh, I'm sorry, I must have mixed it up with mine, they look similar. And then later, they do the big reveal that, oh, I was investigating her the whole time, and he, does, and I switched the books on purpose, and they show him switching the books on purpose. I'm like, I don't need to see that. I know he did that. Assume it's understood that he did that. What I want to know is how he knew everything else for conversations he wasn't privy to, or anything like that. It's there are so many things in this movie that are kind of well, that's weird, how did that happen? Or how did he figure that out? Or any of that. At least show us moving through the interviews and the interviewers giving up that information. Or show us him figuring it out throughout the movie. Which they do neither. And I think that, I'm not saying we need to see him do that and he can just be the god of deduction. And he can just solve every crime easily without so much as, breaking a sweat. I would understand that, and I would be oh, okay, that's fine, I get it. But, don't do it halfway, because then what happens is once you do it halfway, you expect me to then suspend disbelief when you're not explaining it in other places, where it's well, you showed me it there, so there's a clear paper trail of where it is, but then other times you're not showing me that, so then the problem becomes well, why did you show me it in one place, but not in another place? It's because, we didn't, put that into the movie at that point. That wasn't layered into the plot up until this point. And that's a key failing, I think, of the movie. This is another one where it's Moonfall, where I'm don't see it right now. You can go and watch this movie on, it'll be on Hulu, I believe, because it's a Fox movie, or a 20th Century movie. So it'll end up on Hulu, but, maybe Disney Plus even, because it's PG-13, but, a light PG-13. even though there's like 4 murders and like someone gets shot through the neck, and there are 5 bodies in this movie, and it's like, well, whatever. I don't know. I think this movie has a lot of fundamental failings. I wouldn't recommend seeing it in theaters. There are better movies to see in theaters. You can probably see Spider-Man again. Dune is back in theaters this weekend. If you're roped into going to see a romantic comedy, Marry Me is out. I'm going to watch that tonight, and I'll do a review tomorrow morning. I'm not anticipating much. My expectations are very low. So yeah. So we'll wrap up there for today, and we'll be back with that tomorrow. So until then, have a great rest of your day.